The Speier AMA. I'm telling you again, if you haven't read it, because Alex Speier is one of my favorite reads in the Red Sox media. He is terrific, so insightful. Is able to take difficult things to for normal people to grasp their hands around for like how front offices think and how the Red Sox front office thinks, and present it in a way that's understandable for people.
He's like a translator almost.
Yeah.
Like a translator, like the complicated stuff, he's able to kind of put it in layman's terms so that everyone can understand it.
And he does that while also providing information that I feel like it, for the most part, is usually like it's the first time we're hearing from it when it comes from Alex Speier. So when he drops articles, I make sure to read them. When he was doing this AMA, Ask Me Anything, I made sure to read the whole thing. And it was definitely, I mean, it lived up to my internal hype that I built up for it. Sammy, so basically for those listening, I read this thing, and Sammy, you read it after, right? I ended up sending Sammy every quote from it that I thought was even semi-significant. And I don't know, maybe we just like read off the quotes, and like some of them are like a little bit repetitive, but like the overall theme.
I've got one that stood out to me. If you want to just we can just go back and forth.
Yeah, give me the number one thing that stood out to you, and then I'll give you my general theme from it.
Okay, so here's a take that I had the opposite take on this, and we've discussed it before. He said, quote, "It's hard for me to see the Red Sox dealing either Roman Anthony or Kristian Campbell under any circumstances." And then he mentioned Mayer is not far behind, and he thinks Kyle Teel would be the easiest to part with, but seems skeptical of any of the big three being dealt. Catchers are so hard to come by, especially catchers that stick. Who was the last catcher? I guess you could say Christian Vasquez, but even his tenure wasn't exceptionally long. Like a guy like Jason Varitek is so rare. And Kyle Teel, based on what we've been told and what we've seen, seems like a catcher that could have a long-term home, whether it's in Boston or elsewhere. So for me, even though his bat isn't quite the same as Mayer, Campbell, Anthony, him being a catcher to me made him, in my head, the toughest one for the Red Sox to move, just because so hard to come by. But I guess on the flip side, that would mean that teams are more interested in him because he's a catcher. So maybe I was looking at it through the wrong lens, like from the eyes of the Red Sox rather than the eyes of the buyer, whatever team that may be. Wanted to get your thoughts, Gordo. Were you surprised that Speier thinks that Kyle Teel might be the most, maybe not most likely, but a guy he could potentially see getting moved?
So the way that I look at it is, so you've got the big four prospects, and that's Roman Anthony, Kristian Campbell, Marcelo Mayer, and Kyle Teel. And I think three of those guys have legitimate star, multi-time all-star potential. And the one there that doesn't is Kyle Teel. But as you said, catcher is such a valuable position if you can find a mainstay there. And like, I think there's this misconception that catcher is not an issue for the Red Sox right now because Connor Wong's offense has been solid. But with the way that the catcher position for the Red Sox this year was at the bottom of the league defensively. And it's not like Connor Wong is going up there hitting like prime Buster Posey. So
he regressed,
it's definitely,
defensively got worse.
Yes, regressed defensively too. But that said, like, if I'm the Red Sox and I see three of these guys as future superstars and one of them as a mainstay that's not a star, regardless of position, man, I'm keeping the stars. I found it interesting. I remember last year it was Cotillo and McAdam on their pod had said, we think Kyle Teel is the most untouchable. And obviously since then, Roman Anthony has like skyrocketed. So like, obviously that's an outdated take at this point, but I'm just saying, like, last year, I feel like they kind of introduced the Red Sox fan community to the idea of these prospects could be treated differently, not just based off of the potential they have, especially at the plate, but based off of the position they play. But one thing I'll tell you here, my takeaway from that can also be kind of connected to a takeaway from another quote. I'm going to try to find it. I just found it. Okay. He says, I do expect them to at least be engaged in trade talks about top-end talent like Garrett Crochet since their pool of young talent in the big leagues and near the big leagues can match up with just about any club. Now, in the point that you made from the quote that you referenced, he said that he was skeptical that they would trade any of the big four, but seemed to have Kyle Teel as the most likely to be dealt. But he did say that he'd be skeptical of any of those guys being dealt. I find it interesting to see him say that he thinks they'll be in discussions for a top-of-the-line starting pitcher like Garrett Crochet but also maintaining the opinion that he doesn't think the big four are going to get traded. Like, does that make sense? Like obviously that can involve Jarren Duran. It can involve Tristan Casas, who he said somewhere in here, I'll find the quote. He said Casas.
He said it's unlikely he gets moved, but the chances are more than zero. Basically what we've been saying for a while, what most people have been saying.
They said they have to be open-minded, but the bar for dealing Casas would have to be very, very high. He said, I'd say the chances of dealing Casas are low, but greater than zero.
Yeah. So when it comes to Crochet, I really can't fathom a trade package for him that doesn't include at least one of the big three, because the White Sox are so far from contending. Even a guy like Jarren Duran, who's 27, 28 years old, by the time the White Sox are contending, at the very best, Duran's going to be like 30, 31 years old. And for a guy who's, a lot of his success is predicated on his speed, don't think they'd want him. Wilyer Abreu, very good player. I don't think that's enough to get Garrett Crochet. Casas, maybe, but I don't think the Red Sox would even consider that, because that's 4 or 5 years of Casas. Goro, the Casas contract. 4 years of Casas for 2 years of Crochet. That doesn't really make sense to me. I doubt it makes sense to the Red Sox. So if they're going to look at Crochet, I figure it has to include at least one of those big four. I think it's officially a big four, not a big three at this point. One of those big four guys. I don't think Braden Montgomery from the Red Sox, not Colson Montgomery from the White Sox. I don't think Braden Montgomery is going to be even considered in a trade, considering he's hurt and hasn't even played for the Red Sox affiliates yet. So I don't know, maybe you have something in the back of your mind that could bring Crochet here for someone not including those four, but I'll
give you an idea. The idea here, I mean, I agree with your point about Jarren, and I think it goes for Casas too, just because 4 years is a lot different than 5 years or 6 years. I think Wilyer would be on the table. They did just trade Eric Fetty and Michael Kopech in a deal that brought them back Miguel Vargas, who's already a big leaguer. So I don't think that that's a team that is opposed to taking guys that are already at the big league level. But I think 4 years, I don't know about that. But that being said, 3-team trades are an option. And if you trade Jarren Duran or Cutter Crawford, like I am so curious to know what is the best the Red Sox could do, putting together a package of Wilyer Abreu, Cutter Crawford, and one of their good but not elite, like top 10 prospect but not top 5, like a Yoel Cespedes.
What if it would be? I don't think Cespedes is that highly regarded.
Or Blaze. Like I'm just saying,
Blaze,
or Arias. Okay, Arias is a top 100 guy now.
There you go. Yeah, Arias, that's a good one. So you could do like Wilyer Abreu, Quinn Priester, Franklin Arias. And I still don't think that's enough.
I don't know if it would be enough for Crochet, but you could get I would be curious. Yeah. I'd be so curious to know what that gets you, because you could also what if you offered the White Sox, and we'll get into this so many times in the offseason, but would the White Sox really get a better offer for 2 years of Crochet than 5 years of Wilyer Abreu, 4 years of Cutter Crawford, the max of Franklin Arias and Yoel Cespedes? Like those, like a 4-for-1 deal. Just looking at the deals that they traded 2 years of Dylan Cease for considerably less than that.
I mean, I could see like the Diamondbacks offering them like Drew Jones and
Jordan Lawler.
Something if crazy, yeah.
If they offered Lawler, then it's
you're kind of cooked. But if they offered Lawler, would you then be like, all right, Marcelo Mayer?
Well, I'm open to dealing any of the big four, save for Roman Anthony, if you get Garrett Crochet and extend him. So I'm not sitting here I'm not saying I would definitely do it, but if I had an extension in hand with Garrett Crochet, pretty much anything's on the table there, except for, in my opinion, Roman Anthony and Tristan Casas.
Yeah, it's tough, man. This is going to be such an interesting offseason. I'm wondering if the White Sox have any shitty contracts that maybe the Red Sox could take on to.
Benintendi, but that's a terrible fit.
Oh my God,
They
no.
couldn't take on a lefty with no power, like no defense.
Yeah.
Like,
Not much
I'm sorry,
speed.
love you, Benny.
Yeah, appreciate the memories, but
yeah,
woof.
great catch in the ALCS. Just overall good offensive years with the Sox, not taking on that contract. Do they have anything else contract wise?
It's just a barren wasteland. They have.
Oh, they paid Luis Robert, but that's a good contract. So
yeah, he doesn't make much money. Well, he was awful last year. He had a really bad season. So maybe Lou Bob, buy low on Lou Bob. We have him replace Tyler O'Neill, save that qualifying offer. Maybe.
Sammy, I'll tell you, I buy low on Lou Bob is still a big price to pay, but I would pay it in the right like scenario. Like if there's a scenario where you want Cedon to be a utility guy, which I think is a conversation that we need to flush out in a future show, because I definitely think it's something worth considering. If they're willing to do that, then Lou Bob makes sense. If Cedon is your center fielder of the future, then he doesn't, because you'd be paying for a guy who's a really good bat with elite defense, but you'd be playing him not in center field, which I feel like at that point you might as well just pay for a bat who doesn't play defense.
I don't know how good Luis Roberts' defense is going to be long term, because he has serious injury issues. He's actually a lot like Tyler O'Neill, who was an elite defender a few years ago, and we saw him last year. I wouldn't call him a butcher in the outfield, but he was very below average out there. So maybe if you get Lou Bob, you put him in that DH corner outfield, a little bit of center field if needed, that kind of spot.
Yeah, I want to pull up his Savant page to see how his defense was.
75th percentile. So he's still good, but it's just
not as good. Not as good.
Yes. So it's already regressing. And he's not old. He's 27 years old, which is only,
he was terrible last year.
It's only 2 years younger than me. So he's pretty young.
He was 97th percentile fielding run value in 2023, dropped down to 50th percentile in fielding run value in 2024. Obviously way more hurt. So I'm sure he was playing hurt to an extent. But again, we've seen so many guys, Tyler O'Neill, great example by you, Sammy, guys who get hurt. And it's not like they're playing hurt, but when injuries stack up, you're just not the same athletic performer as you were. So that'll be an interesting one to monitor. I don't know. Maybe the White Sox deal him if they get, but I'm sure like it's going to kill them getting nowhere close to the offers this time around that they were getting last year.